when we're doing that, expanding the vocabulary in that way, we're changing the present moment of how she lives in her body, but we're rewriting history. We're rewriting history, and we're also changing the future.
What does a client's posture say about their resilience? Dr. Pat Ogden suggests that we all have a movement vocabulary, and your client's body language may be giving off clues as to how they'll react to adversity. Pat tells the story of a client who suffered a lifetime of abuse and how one small change to her physicality helped her find hope again.
Resilience, to me, in terms of a somatic perspective, has to do with movement vocabulary. I think that we lose our resilience when we lose options, and when we lose options in response to whatever's coming our way. Ron Kurtz used to say two things influence the quality of our experience. One is what happens to us, but two is how we react. So in terms of resilience, I like to look at actions that are familiar and easy for clients and actions that are difficult or unfamiliar, because I know that the more options a person has in their movement vocabulary, the more options they'll have in responding to life's stressors, and thus the more resilient they'll be. So if I'm working with a client who has a rigid posture, for example, when they get stressed, they're not all of a sudden going to become fluid and able to respond in a multifaceted way. Because the patterns will exacerbate under stress. So if somebody's rigid, they're going to respond with more rigidity. If somebody's collapsed, they're probably going to respond with more collapse. So I want clients to be able to have more possibilities in their body, to have the possibility of being very definitive and, assertive and even forceful, but also have the possibility to yield and receive and open, to have the possibility to reach out in a variety of ways for help, but to also to grasp, to be able to take and pull something for yourself. So I think of actions. I think of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen's work, where she defined 5 developmental actions of yield, of a restful, receptive stance, push, which we do, in a variety of ways we push. We can push with just our eyes, reach, grasp, and pull. And clients develop habits of response in that vocabulary. And those habits limit our resiliency. I'm thinking of one client in particular because it was a fairly recent session, and it touched me so much because she'd had such a tough life. She was a sex worker at the time that I was working with her, and she had had terrible abuse and allowed herself to, as she said, she said, I allowed myself to be abused by my boyfriend, like shut in the closet, horrible stuff, horrible sexual abuse. And she was just sobbing that she had, what she said, allowed all that, and she didn't want to live. She said, there's no hope. She said, if a bus hit me tomorrow, nobody should shed a tear, she says. There was one point in the session where her hand went up just a little bit, and we're always, in terms of the body, we're always looking for those preparatory movements that we could have predicted from her history, that she, again, was not able to protect herself. So her movement vocabulary was limited. She didn't have that push. She couldn't assert, she couldn't protect, she couldn't stand her ground, right? So I wanted to expand that vocabulary by creating a context in which she could push. And she felt, she said, for the first time, this feels like hope. Like maybe there's some hope for me. because we expanded her movement vocabulary. And see, when we're doing that, expanding the vocabulary in that way, we're changing the present moment of how she lives in her body, but we're rewriting history. We're rewriting history, and we're also changing the future, because when she gets this capacity in her body, she will be more resilient. She will be able to use that in her world, in her relationships.
Now I'd like to hear from you. How have you used body language and movement in your work with clients? Please leave a comment right below, and thanks for watching.